Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. So sorry about that. We had a bit of an issue there. I was literally just about to go live at 5:27, and the server dropped out or something. So I'm sorry about being a little bit late. So tonight I've got a couple of things we want to talk about, and we have got a little bit of time for some other questions. So so a couple of questions come through already, so that's nice. As you will know, if you're in the UK, we are in a little bit of a lockdown. So as I said last week, we're going to step it up to. I'm going to try and make definitely two. So that's Monday and Friday, and try and get something out on a Wednesday as well. But definitely Monday and Friday over the next 4 weeks for the lockdown. So last week I was talking quite a lot about the secret of freediving, which is honesty, which leads into the other parts that we're looking for. So for progression, numbers are extremely detrimental. And I was talking about, I asked you a question, why do you freedive? And that's still, it's still a thing that I'm going to talk about tonight, is what I'm going to say is, and it's still going back to that question. It's very interesting when you talk to people about why they freedive. Quite a lot of time, people say, "Oh, because I enjoy the freedom, I enjoy the beauty of being under there." But in fact, I've never, in the 20 years and the thousands of people I've taught, I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, what?" In fact, that's not true. I've heard a couple of people say, "I want to do 50 meters," but that's not why they freedived. Because obviously they had to know what a 50-meter dive was before starting. So yeah, I'll go back to my original. I've never had anybody go, "I freedive because I want to go to this depth," or I freedive because I want to hold my breath that long. So going back to why do you freedive? What do you want to get out of it? We can look forward to next year, being as we're in lockdown in the UK. In fact, most of Europe now has got some sort of lockdown going on, and we can start looking at next year, so 2021. If the vaccine does come into effect on the 1st of December, and we're all vaccinated by the 1st of January, what would you like to happen in 2021? And you can start working towards these kind of goals, these objectives. Now, you can already do it now in lockdown, start putting things into place. Obviously, the very obvious are booking your flights for somewhere. I want to go there, so you can book your flights now. But more than that, you can start preparing yourself. And one of the things we talk about a lot in NoTanx, in the aspects, the 10 aspects of training, is mental preparation. So you've got two aspects, mental aspects. You've got mental during and mental before. And that mental before, that preparation, you can start doing now and start working, imagining, thinking about what could happen on these trips or these dives that you want to get together. Obviously, if it's I really want to dive in Barbados, it's actually quite easy to set that up. You just buy flights to Barbados and go dive. So that's not really it is a valid objective, but it's not really something that needs to be worked towards. Okay, you could look at I haven't got the money, so I've got to go out and work. That's fine, that's cool. But what I'm really thinking about is I want to dive in a very specific location, and what do I need to put into place? What equipment do I need? What skills do I need? And if you don't know the answer to these, now is the time you can start asking those questions. Somebody asked me the other day about torches. And weirdly enough, there's a whole selection of torches behind me because I was working on that the other day. And somebody said, what kind of torch do I need? Because I'm going to go on this cave trip, which I will talk about later. I've got some new photos from the cave to show you. And you can start working towards it. You know, if equipment's too expensive, you can start thinking about how to kind of get around those expenses, whether you can borrow stuff or hire stuff, or speak to me or whoever, you know, to find out, well, what, I can't afford that torch. What do you look for in a torch? How can I, you know, what kind of parameters do I need for example, a torch, and so you can work towards it. So really now with lockdown, we can't get to the pools, but we can look at it in a positive light. Okay, so training in the pool in December, it's going to have limited benefit for for your trip in April next year or June next year. You know, physically, you know, what you're going to add on to your skill set now in December is going to be limited effect in April. So let's look at the positive side. We've got a month off, you know, until December, at least, probably until January. We've got that time off. So let's work positively towards what we want to do next year. Yeah, so anyway, so you can go back through the videos, and obviously there's a lot of information there, and you can always email me or you know, message me and ask some questions, and I'll put it into the Q&A if it's relevant, and you can start you can start working towards your dives in 2021 and what you want to do. Starts with, why do you free dive? Next up, you know, what objectives do you want? Okay, so Dusan has asked, what are the rules for safety? Okay, and then he's followed it up, and I'm kind of smiling at this because, and then he says, what are the safety rules for a buddy system when snorkeling in water with bad visibility? Well, both of these are massive open-ended questions, and we have two safety rules. Never dive beyond your relaxation limits. Okay, and this will seriously lower the chance of any, you know, blackouts or sambas or any incidents. Your relaxation limits are your boundary, right? But equally well, those relaxation limits, as soon as you start going beyond them, you lose the enjoyment and therefore the ability to learn. Your body won't enjoy, you know, it won't learn from the experience, and you start not wanting to do it again. So you start losing the enjoyment. So, you know, the likelihood of you continuing to train is quite lowered. So that's our first safety rule. Never go beyond your relaxation limits, because it's very unlikely you're going to black out if you stay within your relaxation limits. Second rule is never dive alone in case you have an incident. So the first one's to stop incidents. The second one is in case you have an incident, never dive alone. So I mean, that's it. That's your basic kind of scenario. Moving on from that, you've got to really decide or know. Again, it comes back to honesty and knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. Are you a beginner? Are you an intermediate, or are you an experienced diver? Now, if you're a beginner, then the safety organisation should be done by somebody else. That's why you class yourself as a beginner. Somebody else should make those decisions. When you're really new beginner, somebody else is making those decisions for you, and they don't really explain them. They don't need to explain them because you're more worried about how to put a suit on. As you start moving forwards, and you can put your suit on, you've done a few dives, then the person organising the safety should be explaining to you why they're doing certain things, so that when you become an intermediate, When you have two intermediates divers and they can dive together, they can start making reasonable choices about the safety. Now, as an intermediate, I as a coach would expect intermediates to only do the type of dives they've done before. So a location they've done before with the same parameters. So you wouldn't, kind of do, say, 5-10 dives in a lake as a beginner. I mean, really, realistically, 10 dives is not very many to get safety structures in your head, but maybe you've done 10-20 dives in a lake. I wouldn't expect two intermediates who have done that sort of level to then just go in the sea, with tides and currents and other variables. That's quite a kind of jump. So as an intermediate, I'd expect two intermediates to dive together, but only dive in an environment and situations that they've done before under supervision. When you get into a senior role, or a senior qualification, you're at the point where you have enough information that you can then judge and start setting up your own safeties. So as a beginner, you're being told the safety. As an intermediate, you're copying the safety. And then as a senior, you are creating and making decisions on safety. And so when you say what are rules for safety, it's infinite. If you're diving on a rope in a lake, it's probably tied off to the bottom. So having a lanyard is, of no use, because you're effectively tying yourself to the bottom of the lake. Any sort of entanglement, you're entangled to something heavy. But if you're diving on a rope that's free floating in the sea, then you would use a lanyard. From the outset, from a beginner, they just look and go, "Well, you're diving on a rope. Why would you use a lanyard in one case and not a lanyard in the other?" Okay. Lanyards, obviously, to keep you near the rope, and for safety systems, like when you can pull up the bottom weight, you can bring up the diver, and equally well, the buddy will, kind of be able to know exactly where you are. So, pretty strong safety reasons for using a lanyard, but in a lake, which attached to the bottom, you probably wouldn't use a lanyard. Yeah, so the rules for safety, I would say, are beginners follow an instructor. Intermediates don't do anything else outside what the safety setups you've already had, and then in seniors, you start making decisions. Now, I'm not going to go into too many details about different scenarios, but it's always actually surprised me that the most of the freediving agencies sign people off as instructors with only one. Usually it's ridiculously only one scenario. That's either on a buoy with a rope or on a boat. Usually, in fact, all of them usually sign off only with a rope. What about diving without a rope? What happens if a friend of mine who ran a school in Israel, they used kayaks, and they made a kayak raft, and they dived off that. And the systems involved in that are so different. Just boat handling and dropping an anchor, all these things and where to dive on a boat when the boat has got an anchor. All these skills which an instructor should know if they're setting themselves up as an instructor, are just not covered, not even mentioned in most training agencies' kind of qualifications, which is quite scary. But all these scenarios have different risks and therefore have different safety systems that you want to be put into place. Depth plays a massive role. What kind of depth you dive into, and I know we say numbers have no purpose, but that's for progression. For safety, they do have a role, but they don't have to be specific. You don't say, I'm diving 21.3 meters. That's irrelevant. about 20 meters is enough information, so you can set up those safety systems. And this leads straight into his second question, which is, what are safety rules for a buddy system when snorkeling in water with bad visibility? Well, it all depends on the dive profile. Now, we dive quite a lot in Raisbury, which is at the moment, due to a weird set of circumstances, the visibility is quite bad in Raisbury, or it was before lockdown. I wouldn't know what it is now. I'm not allowed to go there. But we always have a dive profile, so we'll build on a structure, and somebody will say, right, I'm going to go dive. I'm diving down here at this end of a boat or a wreck, and I'm going to swim along it. I'm going to swim around it. I'm going to swim over it. And I'm going to come up at the other end, or I'm going to go down. I'm going to go around the object and then back up. So the buddy system when snorkeling in water with bad visibility is, well, snorkeling, freediving. It's exactly the same. If you can't see the diver, then you should have a good idea where they're going to be, but you're not going to be going very deep. Why would you go deep if there's bad visibility? So you're talking about shallow depths, knowing the dive structures, but again, it's about the objectives of being there. So you say snorkeling. Why would you go snorkeling if there's bad visibility? You can't see anything. If you go free diving for a bit of training, a bit of fun, and bad visibility, okay, I can see the point there. So your dive profiles are going to be kind of set up for that. So there's some ideas of things to think about in safety. I can't give you specifics because it depends where you are, what the situation is, etc., etc. And weirdly enough, Darren has asked a question that kind of follows straight on from this. How do you judge the right time to leave the surface as a safety diver? It's a fantastic question. And again, it comes back to the situation that you find yourself in. When you're talking about competitive style freediving, in other words, on a rope, everything is tied down. That's why it's the simplest type of freediving. It's the cleanest, the most uninteresting type of freediving on a rope, because you know everything. Not everything. You know most of the variables. So if somebody's diving on a rope, and they kind of go down a rope and up a rope, you should know how fast they're going to dive, because you've seen them before. You know how long it's going to be, and you can start setting up the safety protocols to say, okay, so somebody's going to say, let's say 30 meters, just as a random depth, and I want to meet them at 10 meters. So it takes them, say, a minute to get down, and it's going to take about a minute to get up. Right? So you want to leave a point when you're going to meet them at 10 meters. So you can feel them going down, they hit the bottom, so it takes a minute. So it's going to take them a minute to get back up. So it's going to take them 20 seconds. Oh, sorry. So they're going to hit 10 meters at 40 seconds. That means from the bottom. So you want to leave 20 seconds to get down to there. So you can start easily working out what time you need to leave the surface. So 20 seconds after they leave the bottom, they'll be at 20 meters, and you leave the surface, so you meet them at 10 meters. Okay, so 20 seconds after they hit the bottom. Of course, as the dives change, if they're going a lot deeper than that, if they're doing 70, 80 meters, you might have two divers. Safety divers want to meet them at 30 meters, want to meet them at 10 meters, and you obviously match this with times. But that's in competition style diving with a rope, which, as I say, is the cleanest, most uninteresting style diving. If you're on a reef, then you are really relying on the knowledge of the diver that you're watching. So you really have to bring that honesty in, which I was talking about last week. So what you're going to do when you're there, how long you're going to be. You might be out of sight. And then it comes back to the knowledge of if there's any currents moving you around. Because if you watch somebody go down onto a reef or beyond a reef that you can't see, then and they start being moved by a current, they're not going to come up where you expect. So your knowledge of the currents or their dive profile are really going to impact when you leave the surface. Okay. So how do you judge the right time to leave the surface as a safety diver? It's knowledge of the person and the dive. And you just put all these things together. And this is what the difference is between an intermediate who can follow safety systems that they've done before and senior divers who've got more understanding of why you do certain things. So Alicia Alethea's come in. How do you know when they hit the bottom? Well, if they're on a rope, it's easy. You can just feel them hit the bottom. Everybody who uses a rope will use non-verbal communication. The rope is a beautiful way of communicating to the surface. So you always give a tug when you start coming up. So even if you go down, look at a wreck, come back to the rope, you give a tug to say, I'm coming back. If you're just doing a straight competition style diving where up and down, you will use the rope to turn. So anybody worth their salt will teach a tug on a rope to signify they're coming back, whether they've gone down and done some photos and then come back to the rope and come up, or if they're just going down and up. It doesn't matter. Bam, that means I'm coming up. So that's how you know they've hit the bottom, or rather, that's how you know they're coming back. If you learn to read a rope, takes some time to read ropes as people are diving, and you can tell a lot about their dives just by feeling the vibrations on the rope. So you can tell when they've hit the bottom. You can tell when they've hit the glide, when they look up. You can tell when they, all the different things from reading rope. So telling when they actually hit the bottom is also quite obvious. But it's when they're coming back that you kind of want to know, unless they're shallow enough that you want to leave before they leave the bottom. But then realistically, the safety is it's a shallow dive, so the safety's not quite as it's not timing based. It's about the diver based. So. I mentioned earlier that we've got I've got a whole bunch of torches behind me because somebody asked me about torches, and this fits in really well. Actually, the questions are just by luck happen to fit in really well with the cave dives that we've been doing. So I put a video out on YouTube. It was premiered on Friday night. Please watch it, share it, let people know kind of it exists, and it shows the dives that we're doing in caves. One particular cave that we are calling Muddy Hole, and this is the main chamber of Muddy Hole. It's not really a muddy hole. It's a long story. You'll see why it's got, if you watch the video. See, this is the main chamber, and you can see the stalactites and stalagmites kind of coming down and touching the water. It's a massive chamber, and as you look at that picture on the left there, that is actually doesn't look like it, but it's a perfect circle that you can swim into, and it's like a cage of stalactites. It's amazing, and the water in this cave is crystal like gin clear. And the reason I bring it up now is, okay, I'm telling you about the caves, but more importantly is the safety systems we use in what we call dark water. You could class dark water as low visibility because there is, it's no visibility. Without a torch, it's pitch black. There's nothing. You can see nothing. So you could class this as a low visibility dive. But equally well, you have to have a decent torch because your life depends on that torch, or rather your life depends on your buddy's torch when you're dark water diving. So and obviously these photos I'm showing are lit, so it's pitch black in there, but you can see kind of from this angle that you can't really tell where the surface is. So and you also can't tell when the roof of the water or the roof hits the water. So what you require for safety is you need a diver at the surface where it's safe for you to come to the surface. So if there's a roof like this, you'd expect the diver to be here and not like under, kind of in the roof here. You'd expect them to be kind of out in the open. So number one, you've got a buddy that you can swim towards. Number two, they have a torch and they point it along the surface of the water, so you can tell where the surface of the water is. And they also point it, if you can, at a safe wall, but otherwise any wall, so you've got some sort of idea of where the water, the ceiling and the wall is, and then the surface. And this is super important, because if you're diving and your torch goes out, it's not really important, particularly because you can turn around and you can see your buddy, you can see their torch, you can see where you need to come up, because you come up next to your diver. But if their light goes out, then you're in big trouble. So one of the very basic safety rules that we have when you're going in dark water, in a pitch black, is you have at least 2 torches on the surface. So it's easy. Everybody has a torch. So if you dive in a set of 3, 1 person under, 2 on the surface. Okay, so you've got that kind of guide. And I say you don't, just mentioned actually, you don't know where to come up in these caves. So if you look at this cave here, this shot here, this crystal, the same cave, muddy hole, but you can, all those stalactites pointing down there, you can see, you can't from underwater tell whether they're touching the surface or whether they're a meter above the water or a centimeter above the water. You can't tell from underwater because the water is so clear. So again, you have a diver who is at a place where there's no stalactites, and you come up next to your buddy, and pointing a torch at the wall does give the surface, but doesn't give any sort of idea about the walls, because there are no walls. It's just stalactites. So that's actually the entrance. That's actually the entrance into one of the tunnels that leads off to another chamber. Yeah, it's pretty epic. So I urge you to go and watch the film if you haven't gone to watch the film already that came out on Friday. It's on the YouTube channel. So let's have a look at the time. It looks like, yeah, so we're kind of up for time. So I will leave you with those thoughts. So the first thing I mentioned was, start thinking about why you freedive and what you want to do in 2021, and start working towards it. Start planning towards it, not just with booking flights and stuff, but actually what skills do you need to get you to where you want to go, and then start pursuing it. You've got a month where you can learn a lot of stuff. You can find out a lot of information and start putting it into your training practice. Whether, okay, so it's dry, you might not be getting in the water, but you can work towards it. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is about the safeties. And so we have 3 in NoTanx, and in fact any kind of reason we've picked it for NoTanx, a very definite color system we have, 3 color system, is because that's how systems should be set up. So every system should have that system, and we've just colorized it, as it were. So you've got beginners who are following instruction, you've got intermediates who are doing things that they've done before, and then you've got seniors who are making decisions and introducing new things, usually to do with safety. And that's the 3-stage system that we run, and I feel everybody should really run. And you know where you are, if you're honest. You know what your skills are, you know what your skill sets are, and hopefully that will keep you out of trouble. So really nice questions. They kind of all seem to be on the same kind of level, so hopefully I've answered them all in that kind of conversation there. And we'll see you. I'll put something out on a Friday, and I'll try and get something out on Wednesday, but definitely out on Friday. So we'll have 2 sessions a week during this second lockdown. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Any questions, as always, you can email them through or message them through, and I'll answer them next Monday, if not straight away. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.